Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Janelle Mercado, and I am the project coordinator for the Supporting Inclusive Practices Project out of El Dorado County Office of Education. And on behalf of our Executive Director, Kristen Brooks from Riverside County Office of Education, and our Director, Kevin Schaefer from El Dorado County Office of Education, we would like to thank you all for joining us this afternoon for our incredible Mastering Your Schedule Through Inclusive Mindsets Professional Learning. A special thank you to the California Department of Education for funding our project so that this professional learning event can be shared with all of you at no cost. This session will be recorded, so if you miss any portion of today's materials or content, you'll be able to access it following the session. You can also share it with other folks across your organization. Broadly, we know this is a hot topic, and this professional learning actually came out of a number of requests from the school districts that we work with. So we're so thankful that you all could be here. We have also enabled closed captioning, so you can open it by clicking on the CC button at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Today's session has been set up as a Zoom meeting. We want it to be interactive. And so we welcome you to have your cameras on and check please to make sure that you are muted throughout the session so we don't have to have any background noise going on. But we also want to encourage you to participate through the chat and the Q&A. I will be monitoring the chat throughout the session. So as questions surface for you or any comments you'd like to make, Danny and I will be working together to make sure your voices can be heard. And without any further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Danny Day here to introduce the content and get us started with today's session.
Thanks, Janelle. Appreciate that. Like Janelle mentioned, my name is Dan Daher. I am one of the program support specialists on the SIP project. We are a small team, but a mighty team from all throughout the state, and so we are thrilled to be able to bring some of our experiences here to you today. Again, constantly looking to innovate, include, and impact and support our grantees to be able to do the same. And so that's enough about me. We'll start off with just a couple housekeeping things. We do have a processing guide. We've got a Padlet. We've got a copy of these slides all available to you. If you have your cell phone and you want to scan the QR code, you're welcome to. If you go to the chat, links to all of these things are going to be posted there for you. Please, by all means, access them, use them, leverage them. I hope they help. We hope they help. Paul, I'm sorry. One thing I'd like to note is the processing guide that we have really goes along with the presentation today. So if you do have access to that and you're looking for a place to just jot down some thoughts, things that might be resonating with you, questions you might have, etc., that's a great place to do that. The session is set up as a meeting. So if you do have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat. If you want to unmute and ask, feel free to do that as well. Really, the information in the session is for you, and we want you to be able to access it, engage with it in the best way that meets your needs. This is really what we're working on today. We really want to ground our work in the idea of shared leadership, and we really want to help strengthen our collective mindsets around inclusive cultures, policies, practices, our mindsets, and our mental models. When we get into the nitty-gritty of master schedules, we're definitely going to take a look at barriers that we have to inclusion in our system, as well as resources that we have. A lot of this information you may not know. Our hope is to be able to give you a couple of nuggets or just some ahas for you to take away with, or just some information to consider. And at the end, we will share some of the practices that we've been able to collect throughout the state and from our experiences. And then hopefully the combination of all these things helps you in your journey to create the most inclusive master schedule you can for your school community. So let's get started. Our theoretical framework looks a little bit something like this. We really focus on a culture of inclusion, on inclusive policies and inclusive practices. Those are all centered around this idea of collaborative leadership, this idea of leading for inclusion, leading for equity as the cornerstone on which we build our inclusive efforts. And so with that, let's start with this idea or a mental model on leadership. And so here we go. And I hope you enjoyed this first video.
Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're talking about two mental models that I find helpful for thinking about how to approach opportunities and how to take advantage of them so that we can ultimately live healthier, happier, more productive lives. First is the idea of door knockers versus window openers. And I first came across this idea on the My First Million podcast, which is fantastic, link in the video description. The idea is that there's two sorts of people in the world. There are the window openers and the door knockers. So window openers are the ones who would look through a window, they would see something on the other side, and then they'd open the window and kind of reach in and get the thing that they want. The important thing is that they can see the result before they open the window, and therefore they open the window. On the other hand, we've got the door knockers, and the door knockers, when it comes to exploring opportunities, are the ones who are open to kind of knocking on doors and then opening the door and seeing what's behind it without knowing what's behind it in advance. So that's kind of the key difference. Like if you're a window opener, you see the outcome before you seize it. If you're a door knocker, you're all right with opening the door even though you don't know what the outcome is. And this is sort of like the two different sorts of ways that we approach opportunities. Increasingly, in the world that we live in today, there are far more opportunities for success, however we want to define that, to the people who door knock rather than the people who window open. For something stupid like this, like, starting a YouTube channel, that's very much a door knocking kind of thing. Like you really cannot see where it's going to lead you, but you just have to kind of go for it. There's all sorts of kind of random luck events that can happen to us where we don't know what's on the other side. But if we approach it from I'm a door knocker mentality rather than I'm a window opener mentality, then life gets better. And I think that.
So I hope that video gave you something to think about, just a different perspective. As a quick recap, right? We've got door knockers and window openers. And the dilemma for you as leaders is you may not have the option or the luxury of getting to choose one or the other. And we all are both. We are a combination of both. But it's important for us as leaders to understand that a lot of the people that we may be working with might be window openers, right? We may be working at a school or with colleagues who want to see what that vision might look like before I embrace the change. Where some of us may be a little more open to change, maybe a little more risk takers, maybe a little more trusting in we'll figure it out kind of mentality. And so we may be more door knockers than window openers, depending on the context. But it is important for us to understand the idea of approaching this opportunity in a way that supports and leverages the strength of your door knockers, while also giving us the opportunity to create that vision for the window openers that we've got. So we talked very briefly about this mental model. How does that relate to developing or building a culture of inclusion? So I want to tell you a little story. I want to give you a little scenario. All right. So really quick. For those of us who have used Amazon in the past, our experience, my experience, is that they've got a huge selection of stuff, pretty fairly priced, but the key to it is I get my stuff, whatever I order, excuse me, very quickly, right? And when I say I mean my wife. She gets whatever she wants, whatever she orders, shows up seemingly every day. Like within hours, there's always an Amazon person dropping things off. Well, that experience or those experiences have allowed us or forced us maybe to hold the belief that Amazon just makes shopping more convenient than ever before. It makes it too convenient to ignore. So what do? In the Daher household, we make sure that we never let our Amazon Prime subscription lapse. It is always renewed. It is always available because we want to make sure we have access to the goods at the prices and at delivered timely, right? And so what does that do, right? Like the result is like our shopping experience continues to meet our needs, continues to be convenient and things like that. And really what I want to focus us on are these experiences and the beliefs and the actions that we take, because that is the shopping culture in my house, right? So this idea that culture drives the results that we are looking for. When we're setting up this culture of inclusion, it's this idea that our experiences or the experiences we create for folks is going to start to drive some of their beliefs. People act in alignment to those beliefs, and then we get the results that we want to get. Oftentimes what we end up doing is trying new things, but we haven't really focused on our culture. And so new actions on an old culture may or may not get us the results that we're really looking for. So this idea of really looking at our experiences and our beliefs before we just start doing inclusion, right? And then having inclusion being something we believe in rather than something we just do, if that makes sense. So what does that mean for us today? This idea of reflecting on our culture, both at the macro level and at the micro level when we're talking about leadership. Our districts have cultures onto themselves and belief systems, etc. Individual sites are going to differ. The cultures at each individual sites, grade levels are going to have different cultures, different teams, different departments. The culture and the beliefs around parent engagement is going to change, etc. Master schedule is also one of those things because it is such a big thing on most campuses, maybe all campuses, that there is a culture around it. For example, right? And here's kind of like some no-nonsense examples, right? How many times have we heard somebody say, no, this is the class I teach, or I teach these classes, or my prep period is always this, whatever, right? Those are belief statements. And those beliefs are based on the experiences, the lived experiences that those people had, right? If I have been teaching a certain class for a certain amount of time, I may hold the belief that that class is mine, or that I've taught in this classroom for so many years that now the classroom is mine, right? And those types of beliefs are going to lead people who hold those beliefs to act a certain way, right? Those actions are going to create experiences for you as the leader of those schools, right? You're going to experience that. Now you're going to start forming beliefs about those people acting in according to those beliefs, and around we go, right? So this idea of really starting to create some new beliefs specifically around create these new experiences specifically around our master schedules so that people hold the beliefs we want them to hold around inclusion as a whole, the master schedule as it pertains to inclusion, and then we start acting in accordance with those new set of beliefs to get the results we want, right? So the new experiences may be ones that tell people, or that people leave with, that, you know what, our priority is kids. We believe that inclusion is not what we do, but who we are. We believe that inclusion and equity permeates everything we do, including the master schedule. And so we teach the classes that kids need and that kids want, where they need to take them, and not about I or me or mine or this, that, and the other. So really kind of breaking down those silos, really kind of start shifting the cultural beliefs at your schools to really promote equity and inclusion through everything, including our master schedule. So some thoughts to ponder as we transition, right? What belief do you, or maybe your staff, right, hold about the master schedule and what experiences may have contributed to that, right? What new beliefs do you or your staff need to hold so that your master schedule can be more inclusive? And what experiences do you have to create, or can you create, so that the people within your school culture start to hold those new beliefs that are going to be more inclusive and more supportive of inclusion throughout your site? Again, things to ponder, things to think about, maybe an aha moment, maybe just sparking some ideas, but that's not a bad thing. All right, we're going to spend a second, like not even that much, talking about inclusive policy because we can't escape it. And we understand that oftentimes at the site, or even at the depending on your title and depending on your role within an organization or a system, there are policies that might be barriers, that may be less than inclusive, right? Board policies, how HR staffs your school or doesn't staff your school, CalPads, right? Like who can teach what, and credentialing and things like that. Oftentimes these can be barriers. Now, they can also be opportunities, but it is important to understand this idea that there are inclusive policies, and then there are policies that may be inherently not inclusive, right? And this is not an indictment against anybody or anybody's policies, but this idea of the policies you might be able to control, whether they are in your entire organization, just at your site, maybe it's just even in your own classroom, right? What are those policies, and how might you create these policies to be inclusive with the user in mind, with the end result in mind, with kids in mind, or with families in mind, or with our community in mind? Whoever these policies are for, how can we make them as inclusive as we can of as many people as we can, right? So, and that's all we got to say about policies and policy barriers, because we don't want to dwell on that. Really what we're hoping to do is get into the nitty-gritty of the master schedule process, and then how do we tie together this idea of leadership, this idea of this mental model and mindsets, the idea of a culture of inclusion to inform our inclusive practices. One of the biggest ones, in our opinion, your master schedule. So let's get right in and talk about some inclusive practices, right? For those of you who may have read George Couros, one of his most recent books with Katie Novak, is this idea of innovating outside the box and innovating inside the box, right? People tell one another to think outside the box, be creative, be innovative. Well, that's all fine and dandy, except as we saw just a little bit ago, we've got policy, we've got ed code, we've got certain barriers that create a box and kind of confine us in some ways. How can we continue to be innovative, continue to be creative, continue to do right by our teachers, right by our kids in creating these inclusive spaces, and in this case, an inclusive master schedule, right? So some of you may have seen this video. I want to share it with you because, again, it's one of those kind of mental models of, well, here, check it out.
I used to be a cat. Every day the same. I'd be aloof till lunch, then coldly indifferent after. To me, everything was just, eh. Then it hit me. Why be so cat? Why not be a bit more dog? I mean, look at the world today. It's amazing. Running, amazing. Chasing cars, amazing. Sticks, amazing. Carpe diem. It means grab the frisbee. Maybe we should all be a bit more dog.
Be more.
I love that video. And not because of cats and dogs and dog lovers and cat lovers, not for me to choose. What I love about it is this idea of viewing the same things, just maybe through different lenses, right? I imagine a large chunk of us have probably done master schedules in the past, and we've done a lot of them, and we've got great experience doing master schedules, but it is not uncommon for people in general to fall into a pattern, right? We've had great experiences. We have belief that that our process and our abilities in master scheduling are sufficient, and we and our actions are to create master schedules, good ones, great ones, etc. But right now, what we're trying to do is really kind of shift that, right? Like we want our master schedule to be different, creative, innovative, inclusive. We are trying to add a completely different element to our master schedules. And so we may not be able to approach the same problem or a different problem through the same lens. And I think this video gives us a great reminder of that, to just shift it up, different perspectives, give something new a try, right? Be a bit more dog, right? And so that takes us to really our first tip and trick and first step in starting this master schedule. And that's really our mindset, right? This is more about us as leaders. This is more us about, excuse me, stewards of the school, advocates of kids and teachers, etc. Right? What is our mindset like? Is this something we have to do, or is this something we get to do? Right? What is our why for inclusion? Do we believe in what we do, what we're doing? Right? Is inclusion part of our belief system, or are our experiences leading us to hold different beliefs about inclusion and the value of inclusion, et cetera, right? Have we created a clear vision on how inclusion might look in the master schedule for all of our window openers, right? Have we shared that vision so people can kind of see a path to success when we're talking about an inclusive master schedule and inclusive scheduling for our students, right? And what beliefs do we hold about students, about our teachers? Are we acting in accordance to those beliefs? Are those beliefs viewing our resources, our teachers and our students as positives or negatives? Right? So anyway, this idea of having the right mindset, the right approach, the right mental model, the right lens that we're looking through starts with us. And so important for us to be able to kind of sit back, think about that, and answer some questions. As you reflect, I do suggest jotting some things down, even if it's just to have some notes for yourself. If you get if you're using the processing guide, there's ample space for you to just jot down some notes, keywords, phrases that might be resonating with you, right? But what is your vision for this schedule? How clear and concise is it? And how well have we communicated that, right? When we communicate that vision, we are creating an experience for our colleagues, for our staff, for our school community. What beliefs do you want them to hold, and how does that shape how you communicate this vision to your stakeholders and you know the beliefs that you want them to hold around inclusion and this master schedule should inform how you deliver and communicate this vision to your stakeholders, right? If this is something you believe in, this is something that is doable, this is something that is a value add to your school community, and you present it as such, and you communicate that as such, you're going to create an experience for your stakeholders that is going to be aligned to the beliefs you want them to hold, right? They're going to leave there thinking, wow, we can do this. This is good. This could be a positive thing. And then the buy-in and the support starts to come with that. Our next step is talking about priorities, right? What are your number one goals? What are your goals? What are your non-negotiables, right? It could be for students, it could be for teachers, it could be for your counselors, it could be for other stakeholders, right? Like, there are priorities. We all work with, to achieve these priorities. The reason this is important, the value of this is when we get through the process, and you probably have all been through this process a number of times. When we get through this process, there's going to be times we have to make decisions. And you are going to make decisions based on your beliefs, based on your priorities. If you believe that equity is valuable, and this is our why, we are doing this to be more inclusive for all students. And our priority is access to classes and opportunity, creating opportunity for students. And we've got priorities for our teachers, and we want to make sure we have a user-friendly, balanced, flexible schedule for our counselors, et cetera, et cetera. The order of those priorities are probably going to dictate how you make those tough decisions. When you're caught between a rock and a hard place, you're probably going to lean on your priorities. Now, we may not have written them down. We may not have verbalized them or communicated them or anything like that, but it's not a bad idea to do that so that we can always come back to our why, to our purpose, because the order is going to matter, right? So what are those priorities for each of your stakeholders? Okay. What do they need for the schedule to be inclusive? And how do you prioritize your priorities? If that makes sense, right? Because some of them are non-negotiable. Others are, hey, if I can do this, that would be great too. And so what kind of ranking or what kind of prioritization are we doing with around these? So talked about our mindset. We've gotten our priorities in order. We are asking ourselves, and maybe our team, right? If we're working on a team, we're starting to ask ourselves and our team some of these tough questions, these questions that oftentimes get overlooked or bypassed, but can be really, really valuable when it's time to make, again, some of these tough decisions. So we've done those two steps. Now let's talk about barriers, right? The value of talking about barriers is twofold. One, we are naming our barriers. We are acknowledging some of the fears that maybe some of our team or some people on our staff or et cetera, we are acknowledging some of the fears about how do we navigate these barriers. We are validating people's concerns, right? And we are hearing the concerns and validating those concerns again from our people. So the nice thing about that is we are doing that for our people because we know there are no shortage of barriers. We understand that. I think the value of it, the better part of it, is we also get an opportunity to work together to mitigate some of these barriers, right? And so we are building community, we are building agency, we are building capacity, right? And in the process, creating those experiences that start to shift the beliefs, right? We want to move people away from, well, man, you know what? Our staffing is so bad, we just can't do this, to a belief of, well, our staffing is what it is. We're gonna make the best of it. We have who we have, and they're fantastic people. We're gonna make it is going to be a resource, not a barrier, right? Just that mental agility to find the opportunities through our challenges, right? But we know we are short-staffed. If you are overstaffed and you know it, do not share that with anybody, right? You hold that to yourself. Don't brag about it. But there's a lot of people out there that feel that they're very, very short-staffed, and that happens, right? Our data, sometimes timely data is just not available exactly when we need it. Sometimes we're pulling data we may or may not even need, right? And I'm going to give you an example of that here shortly, right? And then one last thing about our student information system, right? And if you're using Q or PowerSchool or Aries or whatever it is you're using, right? They are all wonderful and they are all flawed, right? They will frustrate you to no end, but they'll get the job done. But ultimately, again, is it a barrier, or how can we use the best parts of this to really maximize our work? Where can our SIS system help us in this process? And how can we avoid all those pitfalls that have gotten in the way in the past, right? And some are unavoidable, but maybe some aren't, right? And that's, again, great talking point for you and your staff. And while we're talking about barriers, let's talk about our resources, okay? Now, this is, here's the value in this conversation, right? Is if we don't openly talk about the resources available to us, we risk missing resources available to us. All right. Again, if we neglect to talk about our resources, we may fail to see all of our resources. And if we're not identifying them, how can we then leverage them? Right. So where are your opportunities to take a look at your resources? What are those resources? We, SIP, talk in great depth anytime we're talking about co-teaching, about the importance of the co-teaching partnership and the relationship, creating parity, leveraging expertise. That's all fine and dandy instructionally, but are we leveraging that experience and that relationship, those relationships, and the parity? Are we leveraging that from a master schedule perspective, right? Are we leaning on those partnerships to really get an understanding of how the master schedule can support their co-teaching and how their co-teaching then supports students, right? And kind of creating that that alignment or that coherence towards our why. Are we leveraging our early adopters, right? A lot of people on your team might be door knockers and they're willing to jump into the deep end of the pool with us. That's fantastic. Are we using that? Are we leveraging that excitement, that that confidence, that risk taking? Are we supporting that? And how is that? How are we doing that to leverage? How are we leveraging that to really bolster this master schedule? Okay. Counselors, I had the privilege of being a counselor for many years. We know that a lot of this process, right? The act of getting course requests, getting that data input into our system so we understand how to build our master schedule, scheduling kids, changing schedules, et cetera, access, opportunity, all of these things funnel through our counseling departments. How are we leveraging their expertise and their experiences and creating the experiences for them so that they leave our meetings with the belief that inclusion is good for all of us, that I play an important role in making this master schedule successful and making our culture more inclusive. So again, are we leveraging the expertise we do have in our building to our advantage? Okay. And then lastly, data, right? Real quick piece on data. I think it's very easy for us, and I'm just speaking from experience as a building administrator, as a counselor, and as somebody who's had experience with master schedules. It's very easy for us to look at the wrong data and get information we may not even need. And it's very easy for us sometimes to forget to look at data that could be relevant, that might give us insight into what we're trying to do. Short example, summer school, right? We talk about how many kids enroll in summer school, how many kids finish summer school, how many kids are successful in summer school and can matriculate to the next class in a sequenced subject area, like say math or whatever. And we run all this data, and it's fantastic in August or July, but is that data being compiled over X number of years to try to create a trend? And then is that data being used again in the winter, in January, February, March, these days, to be able to inform our master scheduling and sections needed next fall, right? And if not, could they? And if they are, kudos, but is it working, right? And so again, this idea of identifying and leveraging our resources cannot be understated. So again, just some things. If you've got your processing guide available, jot some notes, maybe questions you may have. If you want to just throw them in the chat, again, our team is there for you. And we're going to build in just a second, but this idea of mental models and mental agility to be able to identify resources, to mitigate barriers, seeing opportunity in challenge. I really want to kind of hammer that home, because again, this really goes back to our mindset and our belief system. So real quick video. I hope you have not seen this. And if you do, nobody's ever said, I don't like seeing this video, but where do we find opportunity in challenge?
I have a lot of memories from when I was a child. One that's always stuck out to me though was when I was about 10 years old and I was in school and I struggled. And I didn't struggle with English, math, or science. I struggled holding still. And I would try to listen and focus and process ideas, but I couldn't help myself. And to be honest, I would sit there and then I would just start tapping, and the students in the class would look at me and they'd say, "Hey, stop tapping." A lot of the time I didn't even realize I was doing it. And then eventually even the teachers got after me and they would yell at me and they'd say, "Clint, you have to stop tapping." It got so bad that I got sent to the principal's office for tapping. And he said to me, "Okay, maybe when you go back to class, just try sitting on your hands." And so I did. I went back to class, and when I felt myself starting to tap, I did this. I sat on my hands. And that worked for about 5 seconds. One time I was tapping in class, and my teacher, Mr. Jensen, he looked at me and he yelled. And he said, "Clint, stay after class." And I thought to myself, this is it. I am done. Now, I've always been the type of person that believes that a single moment in time can change a person's life. And this was one of those moments for me. And I will never forget it. And so I was sitting there with Mr. Jensen and an empty classroom. And he walked past me and he sat next to his desk and he said, "Clint, come here. I want to talk to you." And as he looked me right in the eye, he said, "Now, I need you to know something. You're not in trouble. But I do have just one question that I have to ask you." And he asked, he said, "Have you ever thought about playing the drums?" And in that moment, Mr. Jensen, he leaned back and he opened the top drawer of his desk. And he reached in and he pulled out my very first pair of drumsticks. And he held them in his hands and he looked at me and he said, "Hey, Clint, you're not a problem. I think you're a drummer." went on, I've never put those sticks down. I've toured, recorded, and played drums all over the world. My whole college education was paid for with drumsticks in my hand. Just because of a single moment in time when somebody believed in me. And he saw something in me that I didn't even see within myself. And from that moment, I learned that there's a difference between being the best in the world and being the best for the world.
I love that video. I could watch that video once a day and it would not bother me one bit. But again, this idea of yeah, I'll be honest with you. I'll share a personal story. I took this video, and when my admin team and I wanted to create an inclusive master schedule because our teachers wanted to co-teach, we watched this video so that we could just get our minds right and start saying, okay, this is not being done to us. This is an opportunity for us to lead. This is an opportunity for us to support our teachers and really, really do something good for kids, because this is our opportunity to act in alignment with our beliefs, and we believe that inclusion is best for all. Okay, so again, what of our barriers can we control? How do we leverage the resources we have? Maybe you're in declining enrollment, maybe you've lost some colleagues in the last couple of years, but maybe you've got some open rooms and extra spaces to create better spaces for kids and teachers. Maybe you've got a surplus of technology. Are we leveraging our people and their roles, right? So again, I cannot stress enough this idea of leveraging the resources we do have and having that conversation so that every resource is on the table and at your disposal. Okay, so here we go. We have got our minds right. We know our why. We are centered. We are ready to go. We've got our priorities right. We know that our beliefs are X, Y, and Z, and our priorities are aligned with those beliefs, and we're ready to rock. And our team is on board, right? So my assistant principals, my principal, whatever, I don't know what our roles are and whatnot, but our site leaders, the teams that create master schedules at your sites, their mind is right, their mental model is good, they are approaching this with the right type of mental agility. We've talked about our barriers, we've talked about our resources, we've brainstormed, we're ready to build, we're getting ready to build. Fantastic. I've said this a couple of times, but we are proponents of inclusion, not as something we do, but ultimately becoming who we are, because it's something we believe in. It's a core value, right? What we do might be co-teaching, might be other inclusive practices or whatever, but inclusion itself is not what we do, right? And so when we are considering the inclusive practices that we're doing, that is our what. We're going to treat that what we do, co-teaching in this case, kind of like we do some of our other programs on our campus, right? And again, I'm coming in with the assumption that we're talking comprehensive secondary schools. So you may have AVID on your campus. Maybe you've got an honors program or an AP program. Maybe you've got an IB program or an MYP program if you're a middle school. We've got CTE or ROP, whatever, right? So we just have this, we have everything on our campuses that make them comprehensive. Okay, great. So getting ready to build. We know we're going to treat co-teaching like we might another program or something else that we do, right? What's our data? Let's start talking data, right? And I want to talk about data. We talked very briefly about summer school data. Let's talk about your course request data. I'm going to state the obvious here, but anybody who has done a master schedule, probably ever, understands this idea that our master schedule is only as accurate as our data, as our course requests, right? So what systems and what structures are we putting in place to make sure that our course requests are thorough, our course requests are accurate, our course requests are, we engage in that process in a timely way, right? Are we getting to course requests in April, or are we starting in December? Is one too early, one too late? Is there a right? Like all of these things we consider, right? But what about IEP needs, IEP goals, and the data and the enrollment data, the course request data for our students with disabilities? And we're focusing on students with disabilities in this case, but this can be definitely expanded for English learners, et cetera, right? Whoever your end user is going to be. Inclusion is good for all, yes? So, but what are those IEP needs, and what is that data telling us, right? So again, when we think about special education as a continuum of services, we know that out of our students, there's gonna be X percentage of students whose learning needs are going to require more restrictive environments, more supports, something that's going to that they're just their needs are that severe. We also know there is X percentage of students who have been and will probably continue to be successful without co-teaching, without whatever. They've just been successful. They're just good students who happen to have an IEP, right? And then we know there are a lot of other students in the middle who could really benefit from inclusive spaces and inclusive practices and an inclusive learning community. What are those numbers? How many sections are you building, and for how many kids who need co-teaching in this case, right? And so are we getting the right data? Are we getting the data that is going to inform our decision making? And we know that I could tell you from practice and observation that our case managers or case carriers or resource specialists or ed specialists are probably much more intimately knowledgeable with students' IEPs than we as leaders might be, as site leaders, than our counselors might be, right? They know IEPs in much more depth and detail than we might. So what structures are we putting in place so that communication is happening between our ed specialists and our counselors and our students? And is there a structure in place or a process in place where we can get the most accurate, data-informed, IEP-informed course requests for our students that are going to tell us how many sections of co-teaching we may need at whatever level we're offering it at, okay? I mentioned earlier that we talk a lot about the co-teaching partnership, and one of the big tenets of that we discuss is teacher parity, right? What does that mean like for you? Because optics matter. What people see matter, right? When you guys may have all had this experience, right? You go, maybe it's still happening at your school site, or you've been at a school site where this has happened in the past. But there is a room, a war room, a meeting room. That's where the meeting of the minds happens. And on one of the walls is this big, giant, magnetic Excel spreadsheet. And we put all these magnets on there, and that's our master schedule in physical form, in tangible form. Fantastic. When people go in there, what do they see? Do they see that Danny teaches math and Janelle is an ed specialist? Or do they see Daher Mercado, and that's our co-teaching partnership, and we co-teach Math 1 or whatever the case is, right? Because when a colleague, a teacher, whomever, walks into that room and sees Danny, the math teacher, and Janelle, the ed specialists, that creates an experience from them, and they're going to hold a certain belief about this master schedule and what it's communicating to them. When they go in and they see Daher Mercado and we teach Math 1 together because we are co-teaching partners, that is an experience that sends a completely different belief message to the people who are looking at our master schedule board. So things to keep in mind, right? Small details, but the details matter. For example, when we run our master schedule and everything gets loaded up and ready to go, and people log in, parents or parents and guardians log into the parent portal or whatever it's called, are they seeing Daher and then they show up on day one and it's 2 teachers? Or do they see from the get-go that it is Daher Mercado, right? Again, the optics matter, and they send different belief messages to the people who open up that portal or walk into that room, all right? And again, we are trying to build a culture of inclusion, an inclusive community, not necessarily a program per se, but we are building it based on what we do, not why we do it or who we are. So give it the attention it deserves. Try to avoid the conflicts, just like you would not schedule, I don't know, AP English language and AP US history, right? Maybe we don't put those in the same period because it's the same grade level of kids that take it. I don't know, that might be different at your school, but an example, right? So how do we avoid the conflicts so that our students can take the co-taught classes throughout their day based on their needs and based on their IEP goals, okay? And just like we're going to build a master schedule around some of these programs like AVID and IB and AP, build your master schedule around co-teaching, okay? And I'm going to give you a sneak peek into what that looked like for me at my site. All right, so excuse me. All right, so a handful of teachers. We have our co-teaching classes. I have them sorted out by color. Okay. So you'll notice that freshmen or underclassmen are in that like light blue color. And it looks like juniors or upperclassmen are in that light orange color. Great. I started with preps because if our teachers, when you talk to any teacher, any educator, anybody really, right? What is our number one resource that we just never can get enough of, never seem to have enough of? It's always time. So great. If we are supporting our staff, our teachers, and we are invested and committed to their success as co-teachers, they can't do it without time to co-plan. Okay. So we took that, we had that conversation. Our teachers made it very clear that time was a barrier for us to be able to jump in, and they needed me or our leadership team to show them a path to this success, right? So this is it. This is how we are supporting you. We're giving you that time that you need to co-plan, to do this well, etc. And that was a commitment that we wanted to take because our priority was inclusion and access, and for our kids, time and resources for our teachers. Those were our priorities. They're not right and they're not wrong. I'm just giving you insight into my process and my experience with my team at my site. Okay. So we start with common preps. We put in our classes, try to avoid conflicts. I know that Art 1 is typically a class that many of our 9th graders take. Intro to Computers was also a class that many freshmen take. and they typically didn't take them both together. So we wanted to put them in a place where it was away from the core content area. Okay, granted, this is only a small number of pairs. You can imagine what this might look like over the course of multiple teachers and multiple teams. Same with Art 2 and intro to business or what have you. More upperclassmen, sophomores, juniors taking that. So again, we wanted to make sure that we put it in a space where it's not going to conflict with their core subject areas as well. Anywhere we could get some co-teaching to create a more inclusive setting, we did that. Great example. We had a lot of students who had some very severe learning needs. They had severe developmental barriers, severe physical barriers to accessing the education. So we know it's very obvious that they may not be able to produce the same artwork, let's say, as a typically developed student, okay, who had no barriers. That's fine. But we also knew that their IEP goals included identifying shapes, identifying colors, fine motor skills, whatever. I don't know what, I don't know exactly every one of their IEP goals. And so the conversation was, if they are working on these particular IEP goals, right? Can our students with the most severe limitations try to tackle their IEP goals while our general education or typically developed students or students with more mild limitations, could they be accessing the general education curriculum and the state standards simultaneously in the same space with adequate supports? And the reason the conversation kind of shifted to, well, it really doesn't matter where Danny learns to identify colors. He can sit right over here. Juliet is a typically developed student. She's working on the color wheel anyway, and fantastic. We're all going to work towards different learning goals. Okay. So those were some of the conversations that were had. Now, they didn't happen overnight, but it's important to note the idea that co-teaching can be very, very beneficial for all students. It's just going to be contextual, right? It's just important for us to keep students' needs in mind and give them the least restrictive environment whenever possible and whenever appropriate, right? Okay, back to this. So we build our sections and stuff like that. Then I got to get in and then start talking. And so we did this, and if you can imagine, we put in our non-negotiables. Common preps had to happen. They need time to co-plan. Our co-teaching sections had to happen. It was what we did, and it was part of who we were, who we were becoming. Okay. And then this same exact process got repeated for AP, got repeated for AVID, got repeated for whatever other CTE, whatever programs you've got on your site that are good for kids, that increase access, that help students become college and career ready, whatever your school goals are, right? Whatever your district LCAP goals are, what are those programs that align to those goals that make your schools truly comprehensive? That's what we did. We built all this out first. Lots of open space, lots of whatever, right? Put in our non-negotiables first. Then we get into this. We got into this conversation of what's a necessity and what's a nicety. What are the things that are non-negotiable and what is everything else that if we can do it, we're happy to do it. Okay. Where we drew the line was if it supported an inclusive culture and it supported students and teachers plural, all. And if it aligned to our beliefs and our goals, etc., then it was a necessity. And we were going to try to find a way to make it happen come heck or high water. It was going to happen. So things like common preps for co-planning, things like access to tier 1 instruction, first best instruction, least restrictive environment, access to A to G classes and CTE courses for college and career readiness. We wanted to make sure that our students, all our students, still had the opportunity to access the athletics and the arts and leadership and all those other things that were also critical to a comprehensive high school experience for our students and our staff, right? And for our staff, we wanted a balanced schedule. And so that means that to the best extent possible, we are our schedule was balanced in that, you know, every class had around the same number of students, that our counselors had a schedule that was flexible enough for them to be able to accommodate schedule changes and the things that typically happen with scheduling and whatnot at the beginning of the school year. Everything else fell into a nicety, right? So when people start talking again, right, I have taught whatever, AP biology for 25 years, and that is my class. Well, the my class means that it is really for me, and that's not supportive of our collective belief system. It's not supportive of our, that's not aligned to our collective goals and school culture. And so it's a nicety. If at the end of the day, Danny can teach AP biology, fantastic. If Danny can have the prep that he's had for 20 years, great. But if not, and that's just kind of like the no nonsense approach that we took, right? It was we before me. It was us before one person. It was the collective. It was a community, not the individual. Okay. So we did that. Then we get into filling in the gaps. Okay. I'm going to say a couple of things. And before you flood the chat box with what the heck were you thinking, or what kind of crazy shenanigans are you talking about, this is what worked for our staff. Okay. I was in a position where based on my data, I understood that I was slightly overstaffed. Okay. I'll share that with you guys. I didn't tell anybody because there's no way in heck I'm giving up sections. So what we did with our extra sections is acknowledge the fact that our ed specialists served as case carriers, wrote IEPs, assessed kids for current level, etc. A variety of, they had a variety of responsibilities that were that really focused on the IEP and the writing of IEPs, etc. And so the trade-off was we were A, going to co-teach, and B, we were going to start the conversation and the training, the PD, on rewriting more equitable and inclusive IEPs. In return, the teachers would get my case carriers or my ed specialists would get a second prep for them to do that, because I didn't want them to take time out of co-planning and co-teaching to go write IEPs. So we gave them time dedicated to co-planning for co-teaching and inclusion, and time for IEP work, holding IEPs, writing IEPs, etc. Okay. That may not work for you. That may not be something you're able to do. It was something we were able to do. And for my students and for my teachers, it turned out to be a great call. If you can do it and you want to do it and you see benefit in it, fantastic. If you don't, Nobody outside of this meeting even knows I recommended it. So feel free to like leave it at the doorstep. No need to worry about that. But as you can see, all the stuff in light blue or powder blue, I filled in examples of other necessities that made our school inclusive, that made our school comprehensive. So one of my teachers happened to be an ed specialist, also happened to coach, right? Another teacher was an AVID teacher. I had an ELD coordinator teacher. We only had, we're sometimes limited in terms of elective teachers, CTE teachers, VAPA teachers, etc. So if you only have one AP or one art teacher, he or she may be teaching every level. So in this case, Mrs. G also taught my AP class, but we put in Art 1 to not conflict with our freshman classes. We put in Art 2 and 3 to not conflict with our middle grades and upperclassmen classes. And we gave the prep that allowed Mrs. G, in this case, to co-plan for her co-taught classes. And so we then gave her the option of, hey, AP art is a necessity. Your prep period is a nicety. Where would you like your art classes? How would you like the rest of your schedule to go, right? So those are the conversations that you start to have. But the opportunity for us was to engage our staff in this so that nobody felt like this was happening to them. They all had agency, had a say, had a voice whenever possible. All right, we did that. Then the rest of this is going to be things you already know. We put in our singletons to avoid conflict. ASB, maybe you got link crew, you got CTE classes. Sometimes if you're lucky and you can afford multiple sections of certain CTE pathways, fantastic. If you can't, maybe they're singletons, and that's how we build it, right? It is what it is. But again, our AP and IB singletons and some elective singletons. And then we move up to doubletons, classes we've got 2 of. If we're limited and we get classes we got 3 of, we'll schedule them after we schedule this. But again, the point is to avoid conflict and increase access, right? Then we went to the niceties. This is all the stuff that comes in at the very end, like my individual requests, right? I'd prefer to have a certain prep, or I want to have, if you got first and second lunch, I'd rather have second lunch, or whatever the case may be, right? When I was a counselor, and again, when I was an assistant principal, and for all of our APs in the room, your principal may also have ideas that he or she wants, or things that he or she wants put into the master schedule, right? And again, if we've had all the conversations ahead of time and we understand this idea of our priorities and our mindset, and it's we before me, then your principal, if you are answering to a principal or working with a principal, will understand, or should understand, that their individual wishes become niceties. The school community's overarching wishes become the necessities. Once we get everything built out, we start building everything else as well, in terms of, all of our other classes, right? English 1, Math 1, biology, chemistry, whatever is left for that your course request data tells you need for this master schedule. Balance it out. I always balanced it out by content area, by subject. I balanced it out by grade. So I made sure that all of my freshmen, right, that my freshman classes were balanced 1 to 6, sophomores 1 to 6, etc., and that I'm balanced as much as possible through the periods, so that if you have 500 freshmen, you may not be the best approach, if you can avoid it, to have, I don't know, 520 seats in a period and 650 seats in another period. You're probably better served having, a little more surplus in that smaller period, and maybe less of a surplus in the period that you're already they already have a ton of seats, right? And then again, prep periods. Do you want to have I don't know, a third of your staff on prep a certain period? Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, right? But you should know that because you've used historical data. So again, another anecdotal example, my historical data told me that I had a lot of seniors who did not take a first period, and I had a lot of students in general, including seniors, who were athletes and were in sixth period, some athletic class. Great. So I kind of built my senior schedule more of a bell curve with fewer seats first period and a lot of fewer seats sixth period, and the bulk of the academics 2 through 5. But your data might guide you in a different way. So again, balancing it, whatever, so that when it's time to load, you're giving yourself the highest probability of success early on. And then finally, and this is, I cannot stress this enough, y'all. Don't let Q, don't let Aries, don't let PowerSchool, don't let whatever your SIS is, don't let them mess up all your hard work. You've probably sat in months of meetings, ran tons of data, and put in a lot of thought into creating this master schedule. Don't let some program that was developed by who knows who, where, whenever ago, mess it up for you. Okay, so I'll give you an example. In most SIS systems, you build your master schedule, you put your sections, it knows what course requests they are, and there's this magic button that everybody's afraid to push, but somebody's got to do it, right? You hit that button and poof, it loads the master schedule for you. Great. I'm not opposed to that. If that's the process, that's the process. What I might advocate for is this. Okay. All of those intentions that you had might be wasted by relying on a code, on a program to understand your intention. Okay. Don't give it that power. Most of these SIS systems give you the opportunity to lock kids in place in where you want them to be, and then load everything else. So that is a much better approach, and it keeps you in control of what this looks like. So what I say to that is, you've talked to your teachers, you've talked to your team, you've determined based on the research you've done that we want to keep our percentage or our ratio of students with IEPs to students without IEPs to about 30%, right? 3 out of 3 to 7 of students with IEPs. Fantastic. You determined that the best size, your best class size for your school is 30. I'm doing it just for math's sake. Okay. We're going to try to keep it between 30 and 35, whatever it is. Cool. So then you set your limit that in each of these classes, I'm going to have 9, 10, whatever it is, students with IEPs, and the rest are going to be students without. Okay. I put those students in based on what my ed specialists recommend, based on those course requests, etc. I lock them into place. I lock all of my students with disabilities, students with IEPs in their co-taught classes, lock them all in place, just like I might my ASB president, or just like I might other students who have very, very tight schedules. Okay. And I'm going to give them the attention that they need. Okay. I'm going to rely on my data. I'm going to rely on my IEP data. I'm going to rely on my team, right? Because if you are in a massive high school and you're talking dozens or a couple hundred students of locking into place, you probably have 6 or 7 counselors who can help you with this. You don't have to do it all on your own, right? So again, this idea of leveraging our resources, relying on our people, building the structures to communicate and get all this done, and then building the capacity in the agency for them to be able to do this with you for our students, so we don't have to do this on our own just by ourselves. They're loaded, they're locked in place, everything's good to go. Then feel free to push that button. It will schedule everything around. But Danny, what happens if I lock in 10 students with IEPs, I load it all up, and I get 2 more? Again, you've balanced your master schedule. You should have no problem taking those 2 students who are not locked in there, okay, who just randomly got loaded in there because the program is designed to do that, and you can move them and bring into another section that's offered that same period, bringing 2 other students without IEPs to get your ratios balanced and ready to go. Okay, very doable. This is stuff that's super commonplace for comprehensive high schools specifically, and counselors throughout, in my experience anyway. All right, so lastly, a quick summary so that we can save some time for us to answer questions and address some things. If you do nothing else and remember nothing about today, right? Start with your why, with your purpose, your belief system, and really focus on that culture. When our why has meaning and purpose, our what and our how become much more clear. We're much clearer about those. All right. Be intentional, be collaborative. Don't try to do this on your own. Rely on people, rely on data. They will guide you, right? You are steering the ship. It'll be ready to go, but be intentional about it, be collaborative about it. You'd be surprised how much experience is on your team, or not surprised, probably not surprised. I mean, you know your team's better than I do. And then lastly, we just talked about this. Randomness is our enemy. Schedule your students with disabilities first. Make sure that their needs are met. Make sure that just like you would any other student, right? If you had an AVID student whose schedule is super tight, you would lock that student into his or her AVID class to make sure that they can access the AVID curriculum. Same with AP, same with our student leaders or whomever, right? This is no different than that. We're just focusing on a different subset of students. All right. And again, your leadership, your work is at the center of our inclusive practices. You are going to drive a culture of inclusion on your campus. You are going to have a say in terms of whether or not the policies on your campus are inclusive for all, and the practices that we engage in at our school sites, right? When we are leading towards inclusion, MTSS is not another thing to do. It's part of who we are. Inclusion is not something else to do. It's who we are. It's not what we do. It's who we are and why we do it. And so with that, I do want to ask Janelle, if you would, putting into the chat a feedback survey. If you have your phone and you would prefer to do it on your cell phone, if you would scan the QR code and please share your feedback. We love getting feedback from everybody. It really helps us make sure that we are meeting people's needs and doing so in a way that is inclusive of all of our colleagues, all of you. If you prefer to use your laptop, by all means, click on the link in the chat. I think Janelle just populated that. And again, your thoughtful feedback is much appreciated. That's all I have. There's no turning back now. We are in this and we are going to make it happen. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be fantastic. But we are here for you.
And I'm wondering, Danny, if while folks are completing the survey, if anyone would want to unmute themselves and ask any questions or thought partner a little bit, or put your questions in the chat. I haven't seen any questions come through yet.
Just want to say thank you. Thank you. Excellent job, Danny. Appreciated the videos. Absolutely loved the videos. Those are excellent and loved the content. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Appreciate that. Love the feedback.
I just want to say thank you as well, Danny. And I love the idea of having the 2 prep periods where teachers can really focus on the IEPs or whatever else they need, as well as take self-care and take care of themselves on their prep too, hopefully. Eat lunch.
Lunch is important. Lunch is important. If we're not eating, if we're not making time for lunch, we are doing something wrong. So yes, our teachers deserve a lunch. And thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate that. Appreciate the kind words. Thank you so much. We do have a really cool question from Carrie about how do you prepare your staff, or how did I prepare my staff for co-teaching? So here's the thing, right? Co-teaching was kind of new to me. Now, granted, where I was at, I was a SIP grantee. Okay, so I knew I had SIP kind of as a safety net to help us out. But really, where we started was with our data, right? And then we started with belief systems. So, do we believe that kids deserve to be college and career ready when they, after 13 years in our system? Do we believe that all kids can learn? Do we believe that we can teach them, right? Fantastic. If we believe all these things, then here's some data that is 100% pushing back on those beliefs, because our students were not college and career ready. They were not successful in their classes. They were not accessing A to G classes. And when they were not being successful. So we had all this data, and we started the conversation of, guys, we are leaving these, kids aren't slipping through the cracks. We're creating cracks. How do we start filling in these gaps and creating a more inclusive space? And so we had these conversations, just being in meetings with SIP. I kind of knew that I wanted to get into co-teaching, and I thought that would be something that we could tackle. And so we had the conversations, and we made it so that my teachers chose co-teaching. When they chose co-teaching, then it was really like, hey, what do you need? How can I design co-teaching with you, for you, so that we can do this and do it to the best of our ability? So it was really about building agency before capacity, right? I wanted them to do co-teaching to themselves, if that makes sense, and not me do it to them.
Yeah.
And so they said, we would like some professional learning. We need some resources. We're going to need this. And they pivoted along the way. And we were committed to, we were pot committed at that point, for all you poker players out there. And so there was no turning back. And so that's really how it started. But it was really about introducing them to inclusive practices. And then if they were going to commit to co-teaching, then I had to commit to their commitment. That makes sense. And that's how we started it.
I would just add, from a different perspective, that something that Danny did really well was, as a site leader, I mean, he really owned it. He partnered with his assistant principal, and that whole year, while he was supporting his teachers in building that culture of inclusion, behind the scenes, the site leaders were doing the research and working with SIP to learn as much as they could about co-teaching. And that meant like going and interviewing other districts or schools who had already embarked on the co-teaching journey. So by the time the co-teaching was even introduced to teachers, there was so much background knowledge and preparation that had been done that there was a solid foundation. And I think that had a lot to do with the success, from my perspective.
Thanks, Janelle. And one of the things that I did with Janelle and with Dr. Anyan Woon, she's on the call as well, is create that logic model, right? And so the logic model really helped the window openers on my team see a clear path to success, right? Being able to tell them, these are the resources we have. This is how we're going to leverage the resources. These are the activities we're going to do in the PD that we're going to do, because these are the goals that we've all set out to achieve for our team. And so including them in the design and of that logic model really help people get behind the idea of co-teaching as their own and not just Danny's thing, if that makes sense. So Carrie, I hope that helped. Yeah, I hope that helped. Any other questions out there? What just burning and just got to get answered? Cool deal. Oh,
Not seeing any other questions. I'm checking the chat and not seeing anything.
all right. Well, with that, cool. Well, with that, we promised you 5, and we want to honor your time and respect your time. We know your time is valuable, and there are dozens of things you could have done with your time. So taking the time to spend with SIP matters and means a lot to us. So we really appreciate you. If you don't have any other questions, have a wonderful evening. Enjoy the rest of your week. Have a great weekend. If you do have a question or one just surfacing, we'll hang out for a couple more minutes and give you that opportunity and give you the space to be able to ask that question. But we'll do that.
Thank you all for being with us. And Danny, thank you for sharing your knowledge and your experiences as well.
Pleasure was mine. I had a good time. This was fun.
This was fun. Thank you so much.